5. Rethinking leadership now that everything else has changed. Change. You think we would be better at something that permeates every part of life, yet we struggle. People feel depleted from change. Leaders are exhausted. Dramatic changes keep them awake at night, managing a more sophisticated and awakened workforce that demands hybrid options. Meaningful work, flexibility, equality, justice, and organizations that care about their well-being. Do you wish you could wave a change wand and suddenly your workforce is achieving their goals and thriving simultaneously? I can't sell you a magic wand, but I can offer you a solution. You know firsthand what research proves: performance and motivation go hand in hand. Productivity suffers when leaders fail to create a culture that supports flourishing. The magic of the 3 leadership capacities introduced in Chapter 4 is that when you encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence, you also foster resilience, stimulate creativity, and promote well-being. Change is challenging, but it doesn't have to be tormenting. Your leadership capacity can help people adapt to change, be highly productive, and not suffer so much in the process. Traditional leadership doesn't do that. If there was ever a time to rethink how you lead, it's now. You have an unprecedented opportunity to take advantage of this clarion call to integrate motivation science into your leadership practice. A new leadership imperative: improving people's psychological sense. Imagine you're at a conference, and the speaker engages the group in an activity. Along with your fellow participants, you comply. You stand up and find a partner, someone you've never met before. Then you do as instructed. You and the stranger wordlessly stare at each other for 60 seconds. Finally, the minute is up, and you turn back to back. You have 1 minute to change 5 things about your appearance. You take off your watch and stash it in your pocket. You remove your jacket. You shift your glasses from your eyes to the top of your head. You slip off a shoe. You and your partner turn to face each other and identify the changes. You each do a decent job of noticing what's different. You think the activity is finished, so you begin to rearrange yourself. But the facilitator instructs you to turn back to back again and change 5 more things about your appearance. You groan but obey. You switch your right and left shoes after removing one of your socks. You roll up a pant leg. You take off your wedding ring and stash it with the watch in your pocket. Now you're at a loss. You don't have any more jewelry or clothing to remove. You and your partner turn to face each other again and identify the changes, finding it a bit more challenging than the last round. Irritated, you begin to put yourself back together. But you can't believe your ears. The facilitator tells you to turn back to back and change 10 more things about your appearance. Although a few people are shamelessly having a blast, one woman seems to have turned herself inside out, and one guy is shirtless. You are with the majority who rebels and refuses to continue. I've conducted this activity for small groups of 20 and in ballrooms filled with over 1,000 people. Still, the outcome is predictable. When I reveal the following statements describing how people typically react when told to change, I get laughs from people who recognize themselves. You feel awkward, even silly, at the beginning of the change effort. You focus on what you will have to give up, not gain. You feel you are facing change alone, even though others are going through the same activity. You can handle only so much change, but notice some people have a greater tolerance than you do. You fear no one will notice the changes you make or appreciate your efforts at change. You are concerned that you don't have enough resources to make more changes. When the pressure is off, you can't wait to revert to normal. I've often heard that people don't resist change. After all, a baby cries because she wants a change. People's negative reaction isn't to change but to their perceived loss of control. I believe that's true, but it's only 1/3 of the explanation. People also resist change without meaning or an opportunity for growth. During the change activities debrief, most people realized the cause of their angst: suboptimal motivation. They felt participating in the activity was imposed. They didn't feel in control or free to sit it out, which eroded their psychological need for choice. They didn't regard the activity as meaningful or as having a clear purpose. They wanted to shut down from embarrassment and vulnerability, which thwarted their psychological need for connection. And they were frustrated they couldn't handle the demand to make 10 changes, let alone another 10, which undermined their psychological need for competence. But another aha moment comes with 3 more revelations. What if you had created choice by interpreting the activity as an opportunity instead of an imposition? What if you had created connection by acknowledging your vulnerability and taking advantage of the available resources in the room by borrowing someone else's sweater, scarf, or tie? What if you had created competence by tapping into your curiosity and embracing a growth mindset? By fulfilling the psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence, the participants could have made changes to their appearance. All day long, people come to an inevitable conclusion: the quality of their motivation determines their ability or inability to tolerate change, discover creative solutions, and experience resilience in the face of challenging demands. The type of motivation they had for the activity either drained their energy or generated vitality. This change activity helps explain how moments of change can be taxing for everyone involved. Coping and thriving through change requires complex processing, reflection, and learning an optimal motivation. Faced with mandated and ever-growing demands for change these days, leaders and followers alike must skillfully use their psychological sense to navigate difficult times successfully. Psychological sense is a person's emotional and cognitive ability to fulfill psychological needs and experience optimal motivation, a state of thriving and sustained high performance. Psychological sense is a person's emotional and cognitive ability to fulfill psychological needs and experience optimal motivation, a state of thriving and sustained high performance. How your leadership can improve people's psychological sense. Now that everything has changed, we need a workforce of self-leaders who accept responsibility and take the initiative to gain the mindset and the skill set for success in their role. I'm a big believer in self-leadership. That means individuals at all levels need to develop and improve their psychological sense, the ability to fulfill their need for choice, connection, and competence. With improved psychological sense, they can make changes all day, if that's what's required. I'm also an advocate for leadership that doesn't block people's natural inclination to experience optimal motivation. The quality of your leadership can help transform psychological sense into common sense. When you encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence through your everyday leadership efforts, you are facilitating people's ability to experience optimal motivation. We know that the more optimal motivation people experience, the more they want. It's a virtuous cycle. You promote choice, connection, and competence so people can develop and improve their psychological sense. They experience optimal motivation and improve their ability to navigate the complexities of change, strengthen effective coping mechanisms, and thrive despite the changes they face. This chapter challenges you to rethink how you've approached leadership in the past to meet the needs of a workplace that has radically changed and requires psychological sense to evolve. Rethink the great, fill in the blank. During the height of the post-pandemic Great Disruption, also called the Great Resignation, among other names, this headline caught my attention. The Great Resignation turns to the Great Regret as worker needs are not being met, expert says. 1. Suddenly venerable business sites were reporting on the Great Regret and its cousin, the quiet quitting, or quitting in place. McKinsey and Company claimed the Great Attrition had become the Great Renegotiation. Point 2. But no matter how many trendy names we assign to the phenomenon of workers changing jobs, it's worth exploring. We won't know for years how permanent the post-pandemic changes will be. But right now, I think companies, leaders, and the great resigners themselves need an empirically based explanation of the story behind what happened. More importantly, we all need to understand how to effectively write our own end story by applying reality-based solutions. The story behind the story. During the great whatever you call it, millions of people quit or changed jobs for myriad reasons. But a comprehensive study by McKinsey and Company revealed the major motivations behind people seeking a new employer. Gaining autonomy and flexibility. Escaping a toxic culture and the feeling of not being appreciated, and craving a company culture focused on employee health and well-being that emphasizes meaning and purpose. Having access to opportunities for growth and learning, career development, and opportunities for advancement. 3. Notice a pattern. These people are not lazy or looking for a handout. They are dissatisfied employees seeking choice, connection, and competence. People leave jobs that thwart their psychological needs. But without an understanding of motivation, they are not likely to find a job that fulfills them. Misinterpreting their dissatisfaction as unhappiness, many job seekers fell prey to the cultural trap of external motivation. Enticed by the usual suspects of money, status, and the grass is always greener syndrome, the déjà vu of unfulfilled needs leads to their great regret. Let's call it the Great Misunderstanding. Rewriting the story of the Great Misunderstanding. Disgruntled employees need your leadership to facilitate their psychological sense and avoid a great misunderstanding. Consider how your leadership capacity can help them shift their motivational outlook when it comes to the top 3 reasons they cite for leaving their job: autonomy, flexibility, control, and choice. Ironically, the restrictions on staying home during the pandemic years helped people appreciate autonomy. They reveled in newly found discretionary time gained from throwing on a pair of sweatpants instead of donning a suit, walking to the next room instead of commuting to and from the office, raiding their fridge when hungry instead of being forced to eat at an expected hour, and having grace time to decompress at the end of the day, instead of being stuck in traffic. The flexibility people experienced while working from home was in stark contrast to laboring in a command and control workplace perceived as toxic and uncaring with few opportunities to grow and learn. Is it any wonder people wanted to escape? With studies revealing that productivity didn't suffer from people working at home, the workforce put organizations on notice. They want continued autonomy, flexibility, control, and choice. Remember, if you want to help improve people's psychological sense, sharpen your leadership capacity to encourage choice, explore options within boundaries, present goals, and timelines as valuable information, and refrain from using controlling language. Focus on establishing a work environment, no matter its location, where people don't feel manipulated by power, incentives to drive results, and the pressure to perform. Meaning, well-being, justice, and connection. Teaching people the skill of motivation is an effective strategy for developing people's psychological sense. When people know how to create choice, connection, and competence for themselves, they are more likely to experience meaningful work. Point 4. Zaid Khan illustrates my point in his viral video describing his rationale for quiet quitting. Point 5. It saddens me that Khan and thousands of workers are choosing to quit, but stay in their jobs. They are undermining the organization, its employees, and its customers. But the poignant point is that they are hurting themselves. Most of all, Khan believes that by not engaging, he's reducing his stress. But with over half of his life connected to work, Khan's opportunity loss from quiet quitting is here trending. Many of the quiet quitters and great resigners either silently or explicitly yearn for meaningful work. What they probably don't understand is that meaning is a byproduct of fulfilling their psychological needs. Many of us have learned the hard way that no job or workplace is perfect. Obstacles, challenges, bad bosses, grumpy co-workers, and some boring tasks are facts of life. But with the skill of motivation, instead of bemoaning a workplace rife with pressure and devoid of meaning, the quiet quitters can learn to shift their motivation and experience optimal motivation anytime and anywhere they choose. By creating choice, connection, and competence themselves, they can flourish no matter where they are at work or play. People who don't develop the psychological sense to experience optimal motivation in their job eventually discover that all the perks in the world still lead to meaningless work. People who don't develop the psychological sense to experience optimal motivation in their job eventually discover that all the perks in the world still lead to meaningless work. Despite claiming to be motivated by meaningful work, too many people find themselves in unsatisfying jobs because money was the reason they Accepted the job. Pursuing money to compensate for lack of choice. Connection and competence may promise a fatter pocketbook. But we know the pursuit of money as a primary end goal almost always hinders well-being and depletes the positive energy needed to sustain the increase in income. Money is symbolic. Yes, people need a living wage, but not just for survival. People need to feel a sense of belonging and genuine relationships to thrive. So when Adam Grant proposed extending raises to veteran workers to keep them happily in place, it wasn't what was being done that mattered, but how and why. 6. Instead of positioning increased pay as an incentive or reward for staying or as a bribe to endure undue pressure to perform, higher wages need to be positioned as a genuine demonstration of gratitude that deepens connection. Desiring more money isn't always a sign of suboptimal motivation, though. When people ask for more money because their wages are unfair, they could be optimally motivated to advocate for justice. Equity or lack of it is an issue that erodes connection in the workplace. A common myth is that people don't leave companies, they leave bad bosses. The truth is just the opposite. People leave companies that enable that bad boss to exist. Injustice is the primary reason people leave organizations, and money is often symbolic of workplace inequity. The bottom line is people cannot experience connection in an unfair organization. Learning, growth, progress, and competence. Imagine a skier who never progresses past the bunny slope, or an entrepreneur who never manages to develop people to expand the business. The reason so many of us quit before we really get started is that our progress is stifled. Think about a goal you chose to pursue because you found it meaningful, but you ended up quitting. What happened? You may have become discouraged because the goal was harder than you thought it would be, and you didn't have the time required to learn. Maybe you lacked the resources and training you needed. In the end, your progress wasn't satisfying. Despite your psychological need for choice and connection being fulfilled, your competence was thwarted. We give lip service to creating learning organizations, but as a leader, if you don't proactively promote time and resources to training and development, people will leave. The baby boomer generation and the generations before them focused on staying in one company as long as possible. I remember when you were chastised for showing too many job changes on a resume. Today's generation will have 5 times the number of jobs their parents did. Their currency is not longevity but marketable skills. One way to hold on to younger workers is by providing opportunities for them to become proficient in a variety of tasks, jobs, and skills. The irony is that the more marketable you help them become, the more likely they are to remain loyal. You can rewrite the story of the great misunderstanding through your leadership capacity. You can prevent people's psychological needs from being thwarted so they are less likely to pursue greener pastures. You can facilitate their psychological sense by encouraging choice, deepening connection, and building competence to help them thrive where they are, avoiding great regret. We give lip service to creating learning organizations, but as a leader, if you don't proactively promote time and resources to training and development, people will leave. Rethink where and how people work. We all want to see the trauma and discontent revealed during the pandemic experience in our rearview mirror. But these problems will persist if people aren't optimally motivated wherever they work, in the office, at home, or on the road. The real head-scratcher for executives seems to be managing a hybrid workplace. Take these 4 statements from CEOs announcing their company's hybrid work policy. I hope you can spot the statement that has the best chance of improving people's psychological sense and generating optimal motivation. Only the least engaged people want to work from home. Sandeep Mathrani, CEO, WeWork. The pushback was swift against the WeWork CEO's bold claim that only the least engaged people want to continue working from home. 7. Mathrani had an ulterior motive for people not to work from home and rent office space from WeWork, which he acknowledged in an apology. How effective do you think Mathrani's leadership is at encouraging choice, deepening connection, and building competence? Is his approach better or worse than Elon Musk's? Remote work is no longer acceptable. Anyone who wishes to do Remote work must be in the office for a minimum of 40 hours a week. If you don't show up, we will assume you have resigned. Elon Musk, CEO, Tesla, SpaceX, and Twitter. The backlash was just as severe against Musk after he made this announcement in 2022.8. He also appeared to have an agenda behind the statement. Musk needed to reduce his workforce and thought this approach might help eliminate people without having to pay severance. Compare Musk's statement with the approach taken by Chris Woollerman. We ask all team members to work in the office at least twice a week. To ensure you don't walk into a ghost town, we surveyed which 2 days of the week you preferred, and the majority voted for Tuesdays and Thursdays. The primary reasons for needing you in the office twice a week are to build community in a way that only in-person interaction can achieve, welcome our new hires, over 80 in the past year, and show a united front to our clients on virtual and face-to-face meetings. To take advantage of the time you are here, we'll schedule training sessions for skills that are best learned in person. We'll also sponsor company social events you can choose to attend if you're in the mood for some fun. Chris Woollerman, CEO, Innova Systems. When Woollerman made this announcement to more than 300 employees, he had an agenda 2.9. He believes in creating a workplace where optimal motivation is the norm. He even built a motivation wizard into its proprietary Inspire software for people to identify their motivational outlook on a goal and discuss it during one-on-one meetings. The result? As the average retention rate for U.S. companies dropped dramatically during the pandemic years, Innova Systems enjoyed low attrition and a retention rate over 25% higher than the national average. Until we figure out our hybrid work strategy, you can either work at home or come to the office. In poll results from webinars I conducted, most companies handled the hybrid work issue this way. Leadership appears woefully underprepared, especially considering that a McKinsey & Company survey reports that 9 of 10 organizations are combining remote, hybrid, and on-site working. Without clarity on handling this extreme change in the workplace, the entire workforce is experiencing anxiety. 10. Regardless of your preference for where and how people work, the issue presents an opportunity to apply your leadership capacities to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. The following ideas will help improve people's psychological sense, paving the way for positive results like Innova Systems experienced. Encourage choice. Remember that encouraging choice doesn't mean giving people the freedom to choose any alternative, it means providing options within boundaries. It's essential to take the time to discuss the nature of different jobs and the role's requirements. If you can offer some people a choice to work from home, on-site, or in a hybrid model, be transparent that not everyone will have the same options. Treating people with equality doesn't necessarily mean they all get the same deal, it means they get the same level of respect and consideration. Procedural justice is essential when encouraging choice in a workforce where one size doesn't fit all. Deepen connection. An intriguing trend is the traditional persona of the CEO morphing into the Chief Empathy Officer. Revealing vulnerability, implementing health and wellness plans, and demonstrating empathy are essential leadership practices for deepening connection with people, whether they are working on-site, at home, remotely, or on a hybrid schedule. The most optimally motivated people make choices that align with meaningful values and contribute to the greater good. Help people explore options and make choices that suit their role, fulfill their family values, support co-workers, and enable co-workers to support them, and best serve customers, clients, and stakeholders. Build competence. Determine the feasibility, level of technical skills required, and equipment necessary to be in a hybrid work environment. Be honest if you can't afford to duplicate the resources. Access to those resources may be a good rationale for coming to the office a few days per week. Agree to measures of competence and progress. Set high-quality, smart, specific, motivating, attainable, relevant, and time-bound goals that reflect the outcomes for the role. Monitor progress and adjust accordingly. Regularly ask people to share what they're learning from wherever they are learning it. The beauty of recreating our workplaces by creating choice, connection, and competence is that when people thrive, they also produce results. Wherever they work. Rethink goal setting. The quality of a goal matters. Even a well-constructed goal will fail to improve performance if it's not optimally motivating to the person pursuing it. That's why I changed the M in the SMART goal setting acronym from measurable to motivating. 11. But remember, not all motivation is created equal. To rethink goal setting. Now that everything else has changed, you need to appreciate the difference between low-quality goals that drive suboptimal motivation and high-quality goals that promote optimal motivation. To rethink goal setting now that everything else has changed, you need to appreciate the difference between low-quality goals that drive suboptimal motivation and high-quality goals that promote optimal motivation. Patricia managed over a dozen hairstylists in a busy salon. She embarked on a goal-setting initiative that promoted entrepreneurial behaviors to increase the salon's income and profitability. Believing in the importance of servant leadership, she took the time to explore each stylist's hopes for the future and help them turn those dreams into SMART goals. For example, one woman wanted a bigger home, so her goal became, double the tips I receive over the next 3 months. A young man was excited by being a celebrity stylist, so he set a goal to recruit 1 celebrity client over the next 6 months and promote my achievement through social media. The problem? Despite appearing to be smart, their goals were at risk of being low quality. The quality of the woman's goal to double her tips so she could buy a bigger home depends on her motivation for desiring a larger house. If she needed more space based on her value for improving the quality of life for her family, the goal might be considered high quality. But if she craves the status and enhanced image the home promises, her goal would be low quality. Being a celebrity stylist appears to be a low-quality goal based on external motivation. The question is why the young man wants to be a celebrity stylist. If it's to be more popular, famous, or admired by others, then it's low quality. But maybe the goal reflects a way for the young man to objectively measure his creativity, innovation, and excellence. Then it might be considered high quality. Still, an objective, inspiring, and higher quality goal might be to attract 3 new clients who return monthly over the next 6 months, trusting that satisfying his clientele could lead to his dream of being a celebrity stylist. The lesson from Patricia is that without facilitating a deeper exploration of the motivation behind the goals, she potentially set them up for suboptimal motivation. They might experience short-term gains but will not be able to sustain the positive energy required for succeeding in the long run. Externally based goals tend to generate pressure, tension, stress, and guilt that diminish the goal setter's well-being and negatively affect the quality of work and level of customer service. To prevent people from setting low-quality goals, avoid goals measured by any of the following: social recognition, such as increasing Facebook friends or LinkedIn contacts, to improve personal or professional status. Image and appearance, such as losing weight to look good at a reunion, or be more attractive to others. Material success, such as earning more money to impress others, buy a flashy car, or move to a prestigious neighborhood to enhance status or gain power. Winning, such as when the purpose is to best someone else to elevate yourself, gain a reward, or avoid the perceived stigma of losing. Research shows that even if people achieve low-quality goals, they don't experience the vitality and positive effects of high-quality goals. They rarely sustain or repeat their high-performing ways. Worse, goals that generate suboptimal motivation are more likely to lead to depression and unhealthy physical symptoms. Point 12. Suboptimal motivation undermines optimal motivation. Another hazard of low-quality goals is that the suboptimal motivation they generate undermines optimal motivation. For example, let's say you're motivated to win the sales trip to the Bahamas and still provide the best quality service to your customer. You cannot be suboptimally motivated and optimally motivated at the same time. Motivation is not additive. Of course, suboptimal motivation plus suboptimal motivation equals suboptimal motivation. But and this is an important but suboptimal Motivation plus optimal motivation still equals suboptimal motivation. When push comes to shove, you'll do what it takes to get to the Bahamas. Because suboptimal motivation tends to extinguish optimal motivation. Point 13. The same scenario occurs with goals based on imposed motivation, such as fear, threats, revenge, or anger, even if it's self-righteous anger. Optimal motivation is a powerful state, but regretfully, it can be diverted by low-quality goals that focus on the shiny objects of external motivation or the burden of imposed motivation. Point 14. Low-quality goals are deceptive. You might wonder, isn't it good to be driven to excel, raise the trophy, or be declared a champion? Isn't it normal to want popularity, status, and power? The Golden State Warriors basketball organization provides an exemplary example of the empirically proven answer to these questions. Team members, the coaching staff, and owners understand that setting records, winning championships, and gaining fame and fortune are byproducts of setting high-quality goals based on excellence, continuous improvement, and teamwork. Even if you are not a basketball fan, please watch the terrific post-finals interview of Stephen Curry by ESPN's Malika Andrews. Point 15. Viewers get a profound insight into Curry's motivation when she asks him if the individual most valuable player, MVP, award was something he'd wanted. He replied, "Of course." But he revealed his true motivation in his next breath. Jerry West is the only player to win the MVP without his team winning the finals, so me winning the MVP would mean that we won the whole thing. To Curry, winning the finals MVP was symbolic of something more meaningful to him: the team's win. Watch his reaction as he's awarded the MVP trophy, and you understand why his teammates describe him as selfless, the ultimate team player, and a humble superstar. I believe his optimal motivation is fueled by how he cherishes his team, fans, and community over his ego and need for status. Stephen Curry epitomizes what the research cited in this book tells us about competition. Winning can be optimally motivating if the pressure to win for whatever reason is not the primary motivation. The downsides of competition are that the pressure to win and the fear of losing erode choice, connection, and competence. An upside of competition is that it can bestow abundant opportunities for connecting with teammates and providing the feedback and information that lead to mastery. The Warriors epitomize a team with psychological sense. You can see the results of setting high-quality goals through the joy, exhilaration, and success generated by their optimal motivation. You can facilitate your team members' high-quality goals by promoting goals that focus on the following areas: personal growth, such as improving listening skills or practicing mindfulness; affiliation, such as forming a mentoring relationship or participating in a worthwhile organization; community, such as advocating for a policy that promotes workplace justice or contributes to the welfare of others; physical health, such as increasing strength or lowering blood pressure; improving one's financial situation for the right reasons, such as saving for retirement or supporting a child's education; growth and learning, such as mastering a new skill, gaining expertise on a topic, or demonstrating proficiency in a chosen area. Competition framed as informational rather than controlling. Motivation is the soul of the goal. You may need your team members to achieve mundane goals, such as the directive to submit 95% of their project reports by the deadline during the third quarter. While this goal meets most of the SMART goal requirements, you need a motivational outlook conversation to determine whether the goal is optimally motivating to the people pursuing it. The discussion should explore if the goal fulfills their psychological need for choice, they don't feel it's being imposed on them; connection, they can align the goal to meaningful values or a sense of purpose; and competence, they feel good about the skills they bring to it or are interested in the skills they'll gain from pursuing the goal. What people yearn for in their work cannot be bought or achieved through low-quality goals pursued with suboptimal motivation. By rethinking your goal-setting approach, a high-quality goal combined with a motivational outlook conversation can be a profound and sustainable mechanism to promote people's well-being, sustained high performance, and improved psychological sense. Rethink feedback. Your feedback is always motivating, but not necessarily as you intend. Over 70% of people receiving feedback from their boss report it does as much harm as good. Talk about suboptimal motivation. 16. I'm not suggesting you stop giving feedback, but I recommend rethinking the way you deliver it. We can provide the information people need to progress toward their goals while also improving their psychological sense. When you engage the 3 leadership capacities to deliver feedback, you almost ensure an optimally motivating experience for the person receiving the feedback and you, the person giving it. Deliver feedback that encourages choice. Winston Churchill famously quipped that he was always ready to learn but didn't always like being taught. He's not alone. Think about the last time you gave someone feedback. Were they ready to learn but not open to being taught by you at that moment? Delivering feedback when someone isn't ready is a great way to erode autonomy. Their coping mechanism for combating their perceived loss of control might be to get defensive or belligerent or, the opposite, to passively shut down. They may dismiss the information, place blame, or resent you for being the messenger of bad news. Instead of leading people to dread feedback, try these 3 practices that encourage choice so everyone can appreciate the upside of feedback. Flip the feedback. Establish a new norm where people regularly solicit your input rather than waiting for you to initiate giving feedback. When you conduct one-on-one meetings, set aside time for your team member to ask for feedback on critical goals and activities. Research indicates that when people ask for feedback, their psychological need for choice enables them to be more open and receptive to what they need to hear. Ask for permission to provide feedback first. Ask people if you can give them feedback. Then, provide a context and rationale for why you're giving it. For example, you can say, "You have expressed an interest in becoming a better team leader. I observed how you opened the meeting yesterday and noticed 2 techniques you used to ease the tension in the room. I think you should consider using them in the future. I also have one insight to make the next meeting even more effective. Would you be open to hearing the feedback, or is there a better time?" Be direct using autonomy supportive language. If you can't afford to wait or risk someone rejecting your offer of feedback, then deliver your message directly using autonomy supportive language. For example, you can say, "I need to bring a matter to your attention, hear your perspective, and explore options. I received a complaint about how a customer service issue was handled. Let me give you the feedback directly, then let's discuss the situation from your perspective, lessons learned, and opportunities for reconciliation." 17. Deliver feedback that deepens connection. Personalized feedback includes evaluative phrases based on your personal opinion, including any of the following phrases. "I am so proud of you. You make me happy when. You are amazing, wonderful, terrific, the bomb. I don't know what I'd do without you. You sure didn't disappoint me when you. I'm surprised at your failure to. You disappointed me when. I am so disappointed that you. I wish you had." The irony of personalized feedback, including praise, is that it thwarts connection. This is especially true when you're in a one-up position of power as a leader, teacher, or parent responsible for developing someone's skill and commitment. Consider 2 examples of personalized feedback. Information steeped with your judgment. Both are risky. "Sarah, I am disappointed in you for being late with this report. It made life difficult not just for me but for others too. I need you to get these reports in on time in the future." Your disappointment in Sarah may prompt her to change her behavior in the future, but for the wrong reason, to avoid guilt, shame, or fear of not meeting your expectations. Pointing out Sarah's unacceptable behavior by cloaking it in your disappointment can result in an imposed motivational outlook. Motivation science has shown that people working from this suboptimal outlook to avoid feelings of guilt, shame, or fear are more prone to emotional and physical stress and as a result are less creative in the short term and less productive in the long term. "Sarah, I am proud of you for getting this report done ahead of time. It makes my life so much easier. I hope you can continue to be on time with deadlines in the future." Here, your praise for Sarah risks her accepting the feedback for the wrong reason to please you. Neuroscience demonstrates how praising stimulates the brain's reward center. Motivation science has documented the undermining effect of tangible rewards on productivity, creativity, innovation, and sustained effort. Intangible rewards, such as praise, tie to people's need for status, power, and image with the same eroding effect. Remember why you provide feedback in the first place: to develop an individual's ability and positive energy to pursue a meaningful goal. Personalized feedback puts that outcome at risk. Personalized feedback draws on Sarah's desire to please you or her need to avoid feelings of guilt, shame, or fear generated from your disapproval. Either way, she depends on you and your opinion rather than her own evaluation and ability to self-correct. A problem lies with praise. My plea to avoid praising has been met with disagreement and even some personalized expressions of derision. But my experiences and the research are too compelling for me to ignore. Praising often results in conditional regard, meaning that a person's self-esteem, confidence, and self-worth are contingent on the opinion of leaders, teachers, and parents. Children are especially susceptible to the downside of praise, interpreting the parents' praise as an expression of love. They believe their parents' love is contingent on their behavior and success, which leads to all kinds of aberrant behavior to please and impress. Both children and adults tend to resent the praiser, feeling controlled by the compliments and manipulated by the adulation. Self-determination theory research finds that giving praise risks eroding people's psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence. Point 17. Carol Dweck's research reinforces how praise affects people's competence. She writes that praising intelligence and talent erodes children's growth mindset. Yes, children love praise. It really does give them a boost, a special glow, but only for the moment. The minute they hit a snag, their confidence goes out the window, and their motivation hits rock bottom. If parents want to give their children a gift, the best thing they can do is teach their children to love challenges, be intrigued by mistakes, enjoy effort, and keep on learning. That way, their children don't have to be slaves of praise. Dweck warns that children raised on praise are now in the workforce demanding tokens, stickers, prizes, and praise for their every move. Point 18. For the record, I want to acknowledge how hard it is to refrain from praising. It makes us feel good, and we think it makes the people we're praising feel good. But we have better ways to deepen connection, such as helping them set high-quality and meaningful goals. I urge you to remember this the next time you have the urge to praise. The feedback you give says as much about you as it does the person receiving it, maybe more. Deliver feedback that builds competence. Pure feedback is the antidote to personalized feedback. You can wean people from their desire for your approval by providing them with the information they need when they need it. Pure informational feedback offers the raw material for people to self-evaluate, self-correct, and develop independence and resilience. Pure informational feedback is non-judgmental, descriptive information about past performance or current behavior that enables improvement. This could look like either one of these. Sarah, your goal is to submit monthly reports on or before the 15th of the following month. This past quarter, you delivered all 3 reports well before the deadline. How do you feel about the goal and your performance? This information allows Sarah to interpret the feedback for herself. She is likely to internalize it as positive, mainly because there is agreement on her goal and expectations are clear. Sarah, your goal is to submit monthly reports on or before the 15th of the following month. This past quarter, you delivered 2 of 3 reports after the deadline. The one delivered before the deadline was missing a signature, so it needed to be resubmitted. The 2 submitted after the deadline met all the expected criteria. How do you feel about your efforts and progress toward your goal? Notice that this pure informational feedback is designed to get Sarah to think about her behavior and come to her own conclusions. The goal is stated, outcomes and expectations are clear. With pure informational feedback, Sarah is less likely to expend emotional energy to deal with your judgment and more likely to explore her own motivation. Depending on Sarah's level of development and need for training, the Conversation could lead to a productive problem-solving conversation, where you consider alternatives and partner on the steps Sarah can take to adapt her future behavior. Feedback can facilitate psychological sense. Personalized and judgmental feedback can land with a thud, shutting people down or provoking defensiveness. Personalized feedback is the junk food of motivation because the impetus for people's behavior comes from an external source, your approval or disapproval. On the other hand, pure informational feedback given in the context of an agreed-upon goal facilitates people's psychological sense so they choose to open up, accept your intentions as helpful, and learn from the information you provide. Pure feedback provides people with a healthy alternative, the information they need to change, improve, or maintain their behavior with a sense of choice, connection, and competence. Rethink tokens and badges. I'm enthralled with a headband that measures 5 different brain waves while meditating, giving me real-time biofeedback. I listen to a raging storm through the accompanying app on my smartphone. The deeper I go into meditation, the calmer the wind gusts and pelting rain become. After about 20 minutes, I know I've gotten into a meditative state when, in the silence, I hear birds chirping. Amazing, right? After a session, I check my analytics to see how often I lost focus and how long it took to regain it. I can see my progress from session to session, which is great. But you know what else I found? Tokens. I earned tokens by creating 9 chirping birds. I meditated for 2 hours this week and got more tokens, which earned me a badge I can share on social media. It didn't take long before I noticed feeling pressured to make the birds chirp, which ironically elevated the storm's ferocity. As much as I revel in the technology, I'm insulted by the company's belief that I need to be incentivized and rewarded for doing what I bought the product to help me develop mindfulness through meditation. What is more antithetical to developing mindfulness than feeling the pressure to hear birds chirp so I can earn tokens, then setting up the potential for judgment by sharing my results on social media? To experience optimal motivation, I need to consciously ignore the pressure to make the birds chirp and remember that tokens can't buy me mindfulness. To my chagrin, one of the biggest trends in the past 10 years has been awarding tokens and badges in the workplace. Like it or not, tokenism is not going away soon. But before I succumb to the inevitability of tokens infiltrating every level of our work life, I plead with you to consider the potential consequences and downside of token mania. If you've thrown tokens at a situation or are about to, will you take a moment to answer the ultimate question, why? If your answer falls into one of these 3 categories, fear, laziness, or misunderstanding perhaps, you'll rethink the token and try an alternative approach. Avoid rewarding tokens based on your fear. For almost 2 years, a CEO sent a detailed and heartfelt letter weekly to the entire organization sharing economic updates, revealing strategic decisions and their rationale, and describing his concerns and optimism about the company's future. People appreciated the quality of the information, but around the proverbial water cooler, they also gushed about his transparency, sensitivity, and vulnerability. Then, one day, he suddenly announced that instead of sending his letter via email, he would post it on the company's internal site and reward people with tokens for reading it. I asked him why he felt he needed to offer an external reward for something people had been optimally motivated to do. His answer: people like tokens. In probing a bit more, I sensed he was afraid people would lose interest, and he'd lose the accolades along with their interest. He was betting that the incentives would allay his fears. But what if he'd asked people to reflect on how his posts influenced their relationship with the company? What if he asked people what value they found in the information he provided? What if he'd tapped into people's optimal motivation instead of depending on suboptimal motivation to get the behavior he wanted from people? I've heard the counter-argument that the incentives must work if people are doing what you ask them to do to earn the tokens. But how do you answer these questions, now that people earn tokens for doing what you want them to do? Example, reading the CEO's weekly letter. Are they doing it with intent and interest? Or are they pretending to do it so they can earn tokens? Research proves that the answer to the first question is often no, the answer to the second question is often yes. If you're rewarding tokens for fear of what might happen if you don't, I urge you to resist. Don't allow your fear to interfere with your leadership imperative to develop and improve people's psychological sense. Take actions to mitigate your anxiety by helping people explore how doing what you are asking them to do might fulfill their need for choice, connection, and competence. In the end, why settle for compliance when you can foster the engagement and energy that comes from optimal motivation? Avoid basing tokens on your laziness. The man I sat next to at a conference described his company's token earning approach that incentivized people to complete training sessions. I asked him why he felt the need to reward people for learning. He explained that the information was inherently dull. He thought tokens would make the pain more bearable. In other words, tokens were easier than finding a way to make the training relevant and compelling. Before defaulting to incentives for motivating people to do something boring, routine, or meaningless, ask why. If what you are asking people to do isn't worth investing your time to make it a worthwhile experience, maybe everyone's wasting their time. But if you conclude that encouraging people to do what you are asking of them is essential to their well-being, then don't take the lazy way out. Bribing people to engage in your project diminishes the quality of your project, but it also deprives them of discovering a worthwhile reason to engage. Don't let your laziness destroy an experience that could improve people's psychological sense. Avoid basing tokens on misunderstanding motivation. If you believe the best way to motivate people to learn, contribute, or work hard toward a common goal is to incentivize or reward them with tokens, maybe it's time to investigate your beliefs about human motivation. People enjoy learning. They want to contribute. They are willing to go through hell and back if they find meaning and purpose in the process. You may discover that people equipped with psychological sense want to succeed even more than you want them to. Rethink gamification. A high-level manager from a Fortune 500 company created a game based on one of my motivation books and reached out for feedback. I love games and wanted to support her efforts, but we ran into an early roadblock when I asked her the game's purpose. She stated her intention: she wanted to teach people about their psychological needs in a fun way. Her response was spot on. But the problem was she had designed the game with a different reason for playing: to win. Ironically, her gamification that intended to teach the skill of motivation undermined the very thing she was hoping people would learn: alternatives to suboptimal motivation. It comes as no surprise that gamification is a growing phenomenon in organizations. 19 sales groups started the trend based on the belief that most salespeople are motivated by money, trips, and winning. Then, ironically, HR departments embraced gamification to improve their employees' health and well-being. Now gaming is endorsed by organizations to facilitate education and effective performance. To help explain why so many well-meaning managers get gamification wrong, I turned to Dr. Edward Deci and Dr. Richard Ryan, the fathers of self-determination theory. They are arguably the most prominent motivation researchers in the world. Along with Dr. Scott Rigby, they are also co-founders of Immersive and dedicated to studying and applying motivation science to gaming, including video games and the gamification of education. How did these lauded researchers get involved in video gaming? For starters, if you don't play some online interactive game, you are in the minority. In the United States, games generate almost twice the revenue of movies. The biggest selling video game, Pokemon, has grossed over $90 billion compared to the #1 movie of all time, Avatar, at less than $3 billion. 20 Ryan explains, games have an incredible motivational pull. The better we understand the deeper psychology behind the palpable love people have for video games, the more we can harness that energy to enhance education, training, and social and leadership skills development. But the experts at Immersive warn against implementing gamification strategies without the insight of motivation science. Rigby points out, many companies rush too quickly to gamification, making the mistake of confusing the tactic of game mechanics as the goal. They turn internal websites for sales or human resources into games or contests that can often lead to ill-advised decisions to wrap glitzy badges and rewards around experiences. Those tactics not only don't sustain motivation or build value, but can hurt the relationship with employees because it communicates that the value lies in the badges and points, rather than the substance of your business or the health of your employees. 21. Rigby, Ryan, and Deci offer two critical pieces of advice if you are considering games and contests to motivate employees. Don't begin with the goal to create a game-like approach. Begin with the intent to create a vehicle where people can be optimally motivated and sustain engagement. Rigby explains, thoughtful application of game design can facilitate an authentic satisfaction of people's psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence. Understanding the nature of human motivation is essential for communicating to employees that your organization and its offerings are where the value lies, not the badges and confetti sprinkled on top. Think about motivation versus rewards. The two concepts are very different and can be antagonistic. Research confirms that games based on reinforcing performance through rewards rather than recognizing and supporting optimal motivators do not result in enjoyment and immersion, which increase comprehension and competence. The likelihood a person will play next week, indicating sustained engagement, autonomy, and choice, or a preference to play more games by a particular developer, reflecting loyalty and connection. According to Deci, who conducted the first studies of monetary rewards and intrinsic motivation, giving rewards to reinforce learning undermines short-term learning and long-term engagement in games and goals in the workplace. However, people will find activities intrinsically rewarding and more deeply satisfying when their choice, connection, and competence are respected, encouraged, and supported by game elements and their managers at work. Despite the misuse of gamification in the workplace, wouldn't it be amazing if we could help people fulfill their psychological needs and experience optimal motivation through the games we play? Rethink rewards. As a fierce advocate of striving for optimal motivation instead of throwing tokens, badges, and rewards at people, I am armed and ready with scientific proof to answer the inevitable question I get during my presentations: are rewards ever appropriate? But thanks to compelling new research on the topic, I've softened my hardline no. While I stand by the ineffectiveness of rewards to motivate and sustain behavior change, I now add 3 caveats to my answer. Caveat number 1, the last resort. Rewards may not be appropriate or the best choice for promoting the behavior you need from someone, but you might decide they are necessary. In April 2022, the FBI announced a $10,000 reward seeking the public's help to find those responsible for pointing lasers at airplanes in flight near Seattle. The danger posed to pilots, passengers, and people on the ground was too great to ignore. Point 22. Selling out a friend for $10,000 is sad. But it's more pathetic not to do the right thing by stopping them or voluntarily turning them in without an incentive. You might justify bribes when the stakes are high and the timeline is short. But I still contend that rewards are a last resort only when people refuse to do the right thing for the common good. Caveat number 2, reframe incentives. Margie Blanchard is a co-founder of the Ken Blanchard Companies. Years ago, as president of the company, Margie became a fierce advocate of regular and formalized one-on-one meetings between managers and their employees to improve relationships and foster the company's flagship programs, SLII Registered and Self-Leadership. In full disclosure, I'm the lead developer of Self-Leadership with Ken Blanchard and Lawrence Hawkins. Margie sheepishly explains what it took to make one-on-one meetings an integral part of the organization's culture. We had to pay managers to do them. We paid each manager $200 per direct report for conducting bi-weekly one-on-one meetings. It's not something I am proud to admit, but I am proud that today these conversations are a centerpiece of our culture, because people recognize their value. Let me be quick to point out that Margie's approach worked not because she was paying people but because she framed her proposal in a way that enabled people to see it through an optimal motivational outlook. Her proposal: we believe one-on-one meetings are so vital to building successful relationships, honoring our values, and being a role model to our clients that I am willing to pay you to do it for 1 year. After this year, I trust that the value of the practice will speak for itself. As a witness from the beginning, I can attest that this is precisely what happened. If you need to sweeten the pot to get people to try what's good for them, be careful how you position the proposal. Be sure to do the following. Focus on the behavior you want to see. Demonstrate that you are empathetic about how individual concerns might be impacted. Perhaps most importantly, remind people that the reward is not a carrot to entice their compliance but a reflection of how strongly you believe in the benefit of the behavior. Instead of offering money as an incentive, highlight the significance of what you are asking from people to them and the organization. Caveat number 3, make rewards meaningful. I just wrote about my chagrin with tokens and badges, but I thought I'd offer an example that worked. I often shop at Jimbo's, a grocery store here in San Diego. Like most retailers, it faced the movement to reduce single-use plastic bags. Some states banned plastic bags, and some instituted a disincentive by charging extra for a bag. Point 23. Jimbo's went a different route. It gives you 1 token per bag when you bring your own bags. Leaving the store, you drop your wooden coins into containers dedicated to local charities. Jimbo's then donates real money to charities based on the number of tokens collected. I can hardly wait to spend my coins. Sometimes all my tokens go to one charity. Oftentimes I can't decide, so I drop 1 coin into each container. Jimbo's simple token program works on multiple levels. It gets the behavior it hoped for because I rarely forget to bring my cloth shopping bags. It helps me fulfill my psychological need for choice. I choose not to use plastic or paper bags. I can donate to the charity I choose. Connection, I feel good helping the environment and contributing to local charities. And competence, I leave the store feeling more effective at living my values and grateful for following through on my good intentions. And finally, Jimbo's reinforces customer loyalty by creating a peak ending to my shopping experience. Research shows that powerful moments that stick have positive beginnings and endings. Point 24. If you are as thoughtful as Jimbo's about offering rewards to encourage behavior change, I might reconsider my answer to the question, are rewards ever appropriate? Rethink trust. The concepts of trust and motivation are interrelated in understanding. Their integration is essential for getting the results you seek from your team, while promoting their flourishing. When you trust another person, you have positive expectations regarding their behavior and intentions. You are willing to be vulnerable to them and their promises. Point 25. Note the word willing. Trust is a volitional act. You choose to trust or not trust someone else. Since trust is a choice, your motivation to trust affects how you encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. Motivation science inspires us to rethink trust in the workplace in 3 ways. 1. Motivation and your propensity to trust. Trust is a two-way street. You trust people to do a job, people trust you to provide them with the resources they need to do the job. For example, let's say you don't trust one of your team members despite his track record of good performance. Because you somehow can't trust him entirely, you hesitate to grant him the authority or training he needs to make decisions on his own. Your lack of trust eventually erodes the person's sense of autonomy and choice, but it also negatively affects his connection to you and his self-perception of competence. When you lack trust in the people you lead, you effectively erode their psychological needs and the likelihood for them to experience optimal motivation. And, of course, we know that people's productivity and sustained performance depends on the quality of their motivation. One adage advises that to encourage others to trust you, you must take a leap of faith and extend your trust to them first. Indeed, research finds that when a leader scores low on the propensity to trust others, others are less likely to find that leader trustworthy. 26. But your trusting others requires a skillful evaluation of their ability to accept what you trust them to do. Even more challenging, your propensity to trust may be hampered by your experience. Trust is a historical concept. For example, You might have been burned by delegating an important project to someone who failed to deliver. That awful experience eroded your sense of connection because you felt betrayed by the person's lack of effort. Or maybe your sense of competence was shattered, and now you question your ability to delegate effectively. Ask yourself, what's your motivation to trust? How has your motivation to trust been shaped by past experiences? Your propensity to trust others might be trigger sensitive because choice, connection, or competence were undermined in the past. If you've ever been challenged to start dating again after a bad breakup, you know what I mean. The question is, are you willing to surrender to the possibility of facing similar pain again so you can move on and step into something more meaningful? 2. Motivation and your team members' propensity to trust. Like you, the people you lead may carry the baggage of unfulfilled needs. So their propensity to trust is affected by their historical experiences. Point 27. If that's not enough to concern you, motivation research shows a correlation between employees' trust in their leaders and the degree to which their psychological needs are met at work. Point 28. Their ability to trust you as a leader is significantly affected by how well your workplace implements motivation science, making it more or less likely for them to experience optimal motivation. The interrelationship between motivation and trust is profound. People's fulfillment of choice, connection, and competence, whether from the environment, you, or themselves, opens up their ability to trust others. Leadership involves an exchange of influence between people. Your leadership capacity to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence is fundamental to trusting relationships where people feel safe, seen, and heard. But it's also essential for people to see you as trustworthy. 3. The dark side of motivation and trust. A work environment that cultivates choice, connection, and competence is one thing. But an environment that thwarts these needs is another. A perilous dark side exists where trust intersects with people's psychological needs. According to motivation science, employees' trust in their leader is inversely related to how much employees feel their psychological needs are being thwarted at work. Said differently, the more employees' choice, connection, and competence are thwarted, the less they will trust their leader. 29. Where you find toxic workplaces, you find need-thwarting environments. In her book Bad Leadership, Barbara Kellerman reveals need-thwarting leader behaviors, including callous behavior, example lack of kindness or attention to what others want, corruption, example lying, stealing, insularity, example favoring members of an in-group, or evil behaviors, example causing pain to keep power over others. Point 30. As millions of job seekers will attest as they attempt to escape, toxic workplaces are dysfunctional and lack psychological safety. Instead of people trusting each other, they clam up or keep their heads down to protect themselves. They start to look out for their own interests and stop taking personal risks for the team's sake. The quit and stay phenomenon won't disappear until toxic workplaces do. The truth also dies in darkness as people will never speak their truth to power. The said truth is when psychological needs are thwarted, people are no longer willing to be vulnerable to others, making trust impossible. Psychological sense to the rescue. Leading with psychological sense involves balancing and honestly processing your inner experiences and environment. That means you can pinpoint positive emotional states. But it also means you can notice, acknowledge, and accept your challenging, less favorable emotional states. If you have the muscle to withstand your own tough emotions, you can be a pillar of strength for others who come to you as they process theirs. Your psychological sense will help you practice the 3 leadership capacities to support people's needs and self-regulate to avoid the abusive or destructive behaviors that thwart their needs. Your motivational leadership affects trust going and coming. You lay the foundation for trust to grow between you and your team when you encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. In return, your optimally motivated team members deem you trustworthy because you helped them fulfill their psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence. A case in point, rethinking employee engagement. Alvar Pira is aspirational as the commercial learning and development Senior manager at Beckman Coulter DX Europe, he has an unyielding belief that educating leaders at all levels in an organization is the key to unlocking the potential in every human being. But he isn't naive. He understands the pressure for executives to demand results, especially in publicly held companies. He appreciates the burden managers feel in executing strategies that achieve those results. But after decades of management positions in international sales, training, and continuous improvement, Alvar also grasps how ineffective traditional methods of motivation are for generating and sustaining the high performance required to do what executives and managers are asking people to do. Alvar explains, year after year, many managers witness the same theme: how do we do more with less? How do we sell more at better margins with fewer resources, follow lean management processes, and optimize everything? Managers are constantly being held accountable to hit more challenging targets. The managers are beyond stressed, and people are beyond exhausted, and we have data to prove it. Like many companies, we measure engagement. We have annual objectives and a process to manage objectives. Then we realize we have an engagement gap. That's when managers jump to motivation as a solution. But because they don't understand the connection between engagement and motivation, they resort to external motivation, incentives, and bonuses to engage people. They tend to believe their only recourse to improve engagement is manipulating or bribing people into it. Alvar wants managers to rethink their approach to employee engagement. His rethinking began after reading my first book on motivation. Now he poses to others the question that reshaped his understanding of engagement and motivation: where does engagement come from? As Alvar understands firsthand, organizations spend a ton to measure, analyze, and build plans around a phenomenon that researchers have only recently explored: how people become engaged. 31 companies are doing all this work to improve engagement without understanding its root cause. How can you fix an engagement problem if you don't understand how individuals become disengaged or engaged in the first place? Alvar asks. The cutting-edge research Alvar took to heart shows how individuals are constantly appraising the workplace by consciously and subconsciously asking, do I feel safe or threatened? Am I energized or enervated? Do I feel negative or positive? This appraisal leaves them feeling positive well-being or negative ill-being. Whatever they conclude determines their intentions. Those intentions become the most significant predictors of behavior. 32. A positive appraisal that results in a positive sense of well-being leads to positive intentions and behaviors that generate employee engagement. A negative appraisal leads to disengagement. 33. Alvar's aha moment came with the realization that when people are optimally motivated, they tend to have a positive appraisal that leads to high engagement. When they experience suboptimal motivation, they are more likely to go down the path to disengagement. The research Alvar refers to is summarized in Figure 5.1. 34. In Figure 5.1, the plus symbols reflect a significant positive correlation between optimal motivation and the 5 intentions that lead to employee work passion. The no signs indicate no significant correlation between suboptimal motivation and the 5 intentions, and the minus signs signify a significant negative correlation between the disinterested motivational outlook and the 5 intentions that lead to employee disengagement. Alvar reinforces the message whenever he can and hopes managers take the message to heart. Optimal motivation fuels employee work passion. Suboptimal motivation fuels disengagement. I support Susan's assertion that motivating people doesn't work, but that managers play an essential role in people's appraisal process. By rethinking their approach to motivation, managers can encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. So people are more likely to experience the day-to-day optimal motivation that leads to engagement and employee work passion. 35. A reality that Alvar accepts is that, like most managers, he needs to work within his realm of control to do what he can to set up an environment where people can be more optimally motivated. I don't have the position or power to change everything in my organization. But what I can do is find champions, work with early adopters, and make small changes that might have a positive ripple effect. I know we won't change the paradigm overnight, but I'm on a mission to teach managers the truth about motivation and how the quality of a person's motivation fuels either disengagement or employee work passion. Figure 5.1 The business case for optimal motivation. Alvar knows his mission includes working on his own motivation. Alvar lives according to one of my cherished life mottos: I teach what I most need to learn. He laughs, recalling, I had to begin with myself. When talking to a colleague about an initiative I disagreed with, I used to say, I'm not motivated. Or, we would ask each other, okay, between 0 and 10. How motivated are you to work on this goal? I had to rethink my own motivation. Now I ask myself, what's my motivational outlook? Is my motivation suboptimal or optimal? Do I need to create choice, connection, or competence? You cannot deny Alvar's passion for sharing what he learns with others. He notes, for the sake of people's health and their own, managers need to rethink the way they lead. To that end, I want to teach them the leadership capacities to improve people's psychological sense so they can experience choice, connection, and competence and generate the optimal motivation to thrive and be effective under any circumstances. Recapping rethinking leadership now that everything else has changed. We have the greatest opportunity, perhaps in history, to transform the way we work to create a workplace where producing results doesn't undermine people's health and well-being. People can be effective and flourish when equipped with psychological sense, the emotional and cognitive ability to fulfill psychological needs and experience optimal motivation, thriving, and sustained high performance. The leadership imperative is applying the 3 leadership capacities to set goals, provide feedback, and deal with issues ranging from hybrid work to gamification. When leaders encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. 6. Leader, heal thyself. Years ago, I met with Dr. Edward Deci, recognized as the father of and leading researcher in the field of intrinsic motivation and one of my heroes. My purpose was to get his reaction to the spectrum of motivation and our approach to motivation. I explained, we imagine a whole new world at work where every individual accepts responsibility and takes the initiative for creating their own optimal motivation. After studying the model and descriptions for mastering motivation, Deci paused. I was so relieved when he announced, we are simpatico. Buoyed by his endorsement, I explained that we also wanted to teach managers leadership capacities to facilitate people's optimal motivation. Pause, long pause. Finally, he said, okay. But with a caveat. Leaders must understand how to shift their own motivation before they can hope to guide others. He shook his head warily. Can you imagine a manager who hates performance reviews conducting a review to help employees shift their motivation? It will not end well. Leaders must understand how to shift their own motivation before they can hope to guide others. I agreed, but immediately ran into a roadblock. Teaching leaders about motivation was challenging because they believe their job is to motivate the people they lead, not themselves. Despite that widespread belief, I've been privileged to work with leaders who dare to look inward before working outward. I hope you find the stories of these extraordinary leaders as inspiring as I have. Amber Barnes on vulnerability. Amber Barnes is the founder of Start Human in Reno, Nevada, an organization dedicated to rehumanizing the workplace and beyond through an interdisciplinary approach to coaching, training, facilitation, and consulting. Have you met someone who immediately rubs you the wrong way? That same phenomenon happens when you meet Amber Barnes, but in reverse. A few minutes into a conversation, you begin to notice a change, not in her, but yourself. Without warning, you experience an intriguing combination of calm vitality. How does she do it? Amber has worked diligently to become the human she wants to be. Unlike entrepreneurs and executives who rub you the wrong way by leading with ego and false promises, she rubs off on you positively with her authenticity and sense of gratitude, making you feel better about yourself. I'm convinced that Amber's gift lies in the psychological sense she's developed through her unique perspective, blending various bodies of work, including that of Dr. Brené Brown, with the motivation framework. described in this book in Master Your Motivation. Amber says, "You've defined motivation as the energy to act. So when I'm stuck, when I lack the energy to move forward on something, or my thought process is so fragmented I can't think straight, it's a cue to stop and reflect, which of my psychological needs is not being met, choice, connection, or competence." 1. Not long ago, Amber realized she was stuck and pinpointed the cause. She was missing connection with people who mattered to her. But then she went a step further. As she describes it, "I asked myself why my need for connection wasn't being fulfilled. I realized that I had walled myself off and stopped communicating my needs to people. I was suffering from vulnerability avoidance." That's where Breen's work came in. When I understood that the fear of feeling vulnerable was blocking me from experiencing connection, I was able to create a breakthrough. Being vulnerable is an emotion. After acknowledging an emotion, we can mindfully choose to feel it and move through it. Feeling vulnerable is a normal human emotion. Amber's motivation shifted when she realized that her fears and concerns didn't mean she was broken. They just meant she was real. Amber explains, "When I stopped hiding my struggles and authentically shared when my feelings were hurt, I surprisingly started experiencing more connection." Amber expresses an irony confirmed by motivation science: the more connection I have with myself, the more connection I can create with others. Using the skill of motivation, Amber recognized she had choices about how she wanted to show up. She could self-protect with armor, ways we foster disconnection and avoid vulnerability, or she could choose to be open-hearted and share her truths. Amber says, "When I make a choice to lean into vulnerability and see it as a strength rather than a weakness, I'm more likely to have authentic connections with people I care about. Then I realize, wow, this feels good. I love that I'm able to be more autonomous, and I experience a wave of competence because I'm growing and making progress. I feel grateful for all the tools in my toolbox that are applicable and relevant for not only me in my own life but my clients too." Amber's psychological sense comes from embracing vulnerability and using it as a catalyst to create the choice, connection, and competence that leads to well-being, a sense of agency, and optimal motivation. Her skill at shifting her motivational outlook serves her well as she teaches conscious leadership to managers and executives. So many leaders think they can fake it till they make it. My message to those leaders: people can sniff that stuff out. You're not fooling anyone but yourself, Amber says. Teaching leaders to acknowledge, embrace, and lean into vulnerability is core to Amber's approach to leadership development. She positions vulnerability as an emotion we need the capacity to feel and experience in order to get our psychological needs met. She believes that only by dealing with your own needs are you capable of helping people fulfill theirs. I am struck by Amber's words of wisdom to leaders, shaped by personal experience. When we struggle and work through our discomfort, we become much kinder and more compassionate with others. We hear the words that signal a person feels trapped without a choice. We understand the language that reflects someone's loneliness, longing, or disconnection. We read between the lines, sensing when they feel stuck, stagnant, incompetent, or inadequate. I'm a better coach, a better trainer, and a better consultant because I've done the hard work of self-leadership. Great leaders don't say, "Be like me." They use their tools to help people create vitality and be their best selves. That's the magic of conscious leadership. Dr. Beth Scaloni on the Motivation Trifecta. Dr. Beth Scaloni owns North County Water and Sports Therapy Center in San Diego, California. She is an orthopedic specialist, certified Pilates instructor, and international consultant on aquatic physical therapy. As the sole proprietor of a small business, Beth has learned that practicing motivational leadership is 3 times a challenge. Beth's first motivation challenge is working with patients and their problems, like me. I've been Beth's physical therapy patient through minor and major surgeries, including a knee replacement. Oh, the stories she could tell. But this is my book, and I get to tell stories about Beth. Named the National Aquatic Therapy Professional of the Year, Beth's competence in healing her clients has never been questioned. But Beth Realized many of her clients suffered from not complying with her recommendations. She struggled getting people to do what was in their own best interest. She decided to try my framework to guide those difficult conversations with people. As Beth explains, I use Susan's mindful questions with patients when they have difficulty being compliant with their home program or being consistent with their therapy appointments. Through the questions, Beth's clients may discover they don't understand the purpose of the exercise, lack connection, or don't know if they are doing it correctly, lack competence. Beth has learned when it comes to the choice people make about their health, she can be honest without judgment and let them know the consequences of their choice. Point 2. I have to laugh when I've given Beth an excuse for not doing my exercises between our sessions and catch her using my stuff on me. But it also thrills me because it works. Beth's second motivation challenge is working with her staff. She admits a big difference between being a good therapist and being a good leader of other therapists. She's not kidding. When I interviewed Beth for my first book, she told me, I've learned to be patient with my patients, but I am not prone to mollycoddling my employees. As a manager, my attitude is like it, lump it, and get on with it. Times have changed. Beth begins integrating motivation science in the hiring process. I ask a potential clinical team member why they chose to enter the field of physical therapy and how they feel about that choice. This leads to a conversation about what they love, their values. And it can also lead to what they dislike and if they will be a good fit. Beth has a clear set of values, a sense of purpose, and a strong work ethic, so by asking potential new hires mindful questions that reveal their motivation for physical therapy, it becomes evident whether the applicant will fit. When Beth hires therapists, they become part of the family from the start and feel a sense of connection. But Beth also recognizes that her staff's daily optimal motivation is essential to their well-being and the energy they share with their patients. She often finds herself having motivational conversations with them about topics as varied as putting equipment back in place to how they're dealing with a difficult client. Beth is a skilled teacher who provides ongoing training and education for her staff. But she also embraces their competence by empowering them to use their own style to work with their clients, meet the demands of insurance companies, and keep the clinic humming. She encourages her staff to give her feedback on how she can be a better boss. She and her office manager even agreed on a code word to use if Beth's actions undermined her choice, connection, or competence. Beth admits, at the end of the day, it's humbling to be an owner and realize that when you give people the freedom to do good work, they will. They make me look good. Beth's third challenge is herself. Beth admits that the pandemic years were hard. I had to remind myself why I chose to run a private practice. With each hard decision, I reminded myself that I had a choice. I might not like all the options, but I had the choice. Recognizing I was in control of my choices returned power to my hands and helped me avoid becoming the victim. When I asked myself why I was making my choices, I got in touch with my connection to my patients and clients. When I align my choices to my values, a sense of purpose, and the contribution I'm making to my clients' health, I find myself making the right choices. Praising risks enticing people with external motivation, so I will refrain from praising Beth. Instead, I will practice what I teach by expressing gratitude. Beth's values for contributing to the welfare of others are utterly transparent. But she's often pulled toward suboptimal motivation by the demands of running a small business, from regulations, paperwork, and financial obligations to needing more space and granting greater employee benefits. I'm grateful to have Beth as a role model for consciously choosing to shift her motivation so she can continue to be of service and grow as a leader. Beth deserves the bounty that accompanies a trifecta of experiencing optimal motivation with clients, staff, and herself. Brock Weatherup on the year that changed everything. Brock Weatherup is on the boards of Pet Shop Bowl UK and Trusted House Sitters, an active angel and seed stage investor in over 25 consumer-focused Start UPS, and an operating partner at MidOcean Partners. It never occurred to me that one day I'd wake up sick and never get better, Brock posted as he publicly announced he had been living with an aggressive form of multiple sclerosis, MS, for the past year. As the wildly successful founder of companies like Fathead and Pet Coach, Brock is known for making savvy business choices. But during the year that changed everything, his choices reflected more the leadership capacity that inspired his team and the psychological sense empowering his personal journey. His wisdom can enrich each of us, no crisis required. Brock's leadership capacity begins with this philosophy: I don't want anybody to be working for me. I want them to be working with me. Over the past year, Brock learned that working hard to build your team pays off. Or as he says, is a 1000x ROI. Brock urges leaders not to skimp on that investment, reminding us that our team includes family, friends, and professional relationships. Point 3. When it comes to encouraging choice, Brock understands that people need to feel like they have a voice. Leaders must convey, I hear you, I value you, and I trust you to make that decision. He says, everybody wants to feel that they control their destiny. If your employees think about their job 24/7/365, great. But it can't be because you've asked them to, but because they want to. Brock admits if people want to follow orders, then working with him might not be their best choice. Physical pain and discomfort accompany his disease. But he'll tell you that he suffered significant emotional distress over the best way to deal with his team, who had worked with him for years on other ventures. The day he was diagnosed, his thoughts were, what do I do with my team? I knew I would be a terrible leader for a bit because I was fully distracted. But then, I thought, these people know me, and they're not going to be mad at me for stepping out. Brock pulled the leadership team together in an act that deepened connection more than he could imagine. As he describes it, I was 100% open with them. I told them, hey, guys, this just happened to me. I don't know what it means. I'm confused as hell. I'm scared, I'm terrified. I will not be the leader you need me to be to take our company to the next level because I'm going to be wildly distracted. I don't know what that means for me and this company's future. And I'm sorry about that. But let me deal with me. You guys deal with the business. I need you to own it. Brock did his best to stay as involved and active as his MS allowed. Months later, the leadership team engaged in a robust planning strategy. Brock's approach to planning was not to give the team a direction but to collaborate. It wasn't as easy as it sounds. Brock's personality type prefers to make decisions. But his psychological sense enabled him to rise above his need to control. He's convinced that the reason some leaders fail to create choice, connection, and competence is that the behavior required goes against their nature. Too many leaders aren't willing to expend the energy to change their instinctive behavior in service of their values. Brock was celebrating his team's competence, reveling in the decisions they were making, and feeling proud of the quality human beings they were. When his body finally failed him, he couldn't see. His hands wouldn't work. That's when I realized I needed to let go of the team and the business, and I could. My team could handle it. Ironically, it was the deep connection with my team and their competence that gifted me with the choice to do the right thing for everyone. Brock's psychological sense begins with being genuine. It's an easy term to throw around but a tough thing to demonstrate, he admits. People can't trust a leader who isn't genuine. But being genuine is also essential to your health and well-being. He elaborates, this will sound like an egotistical statement, but I think I'm pretty talented. I'm not bragging. For me, that's a genuine statement. You can't be genuine without self-awareness. That means acknowledging your strengths and facing your weaknesses. When you are aware of your strengths and weaknesses, you can be intentional and forthright. Self-awareness and intention enable you to explore and celebrate your team's strengths and weaknesses. Entering year 2 of his new life, Brock reflects, I think what surprises me most is the realization that I'm a better man today than I was a year ago. I have colleagues I now consider friends. I've always appreciated my family, but my love has deepened to unexpected levels. I want to think that I was always sensitive to those less fortunate than I am, but my empathy has increased multifold. You do not know what someone else is dealing with. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it isn't heavy and hard. Today, I am satisfied with the choices I've made, but even more grateful for the choices I have. I'm more connected through a community of like-minded and values-based family and friends. And I'm more appreciative of the competence I've gained to deal with this degenerative disease with some measure of grace. Brock's experience makes me wonder, what if we thought about the upcoming year as the year that changed everything? What might life be like if we recognized and appreciated our choice, connection, and competence each day? Could our positive vitality radiate, giving others the gift of hope and resilience? If Brock is any indication, the answer is an emphatic yes. Karen Adams on Facing Fears. Karen Adams is a CEO with international and multi-industry experience, and winner of Canada's 100 Most Powerful Women by Women's Executive Network in 2017 and CEO of the Year by Wealth Professional in 2019. Alberta Pensions hired Karen Adams as its CEO because it needed an agent of change. But that didn't mean everyone was jumping on board for the ride. Karen explains, a virtual unknown to the longtime employees of this venerable organization, I was hired to bring the company into the future. But everyone had their own opinions about what that future should be. My mission was to lead a state manual processing paper-based organization through a technological transformation that would change how everybody did everything. Talk about motivation. 4. Karen realized she couldn't motivate one person, a team, or an entire organization. But she knew she could drive a culture suboptimally motivated by the promise of power, more money, and status or pressure people through fear and threats. Instead, she focused her leadership on developing a core group of people aligned with her proposed values and vision. This optimally motivated team provided Karen with the safe space she needed to form her strategy and execution plans. After serious preparation, Karen and her team announced their first corporate summit to convey their plan to the company. Karen describes the scene. We packed 400 employees into our local Cineplex theater. We fit perfectly. Then, we put on a show. We dressed up as characters and did silly bits about our plans for the future and why they were so exciting. It was funny and self-deprecating. But what Karen did next was inspired and inspiring. In her words, I said to everyone, look, I'm asking you to do something pretty big. Changing the status quo and transforming the organization is a big deal. It's easy for me to say it, but you're the ones who have to do it. You are the ones who have to make the change. I know you may fear all these changes. I understand because I'm afraid of something too, like really, really afraid of needles. I hate needles. I've never given blood, even though I've always wanted to, because I've always been too scared. So, in your honor, I'm going to give blood. Karen invited people to join her in donating blood at the Alberta Blood Bank. She admitted she was scared, but the blood banks were in need, and they could help. Then, realizing people needed a chance to process what they'd heard, they watched a movie and ate popcorn together. People did join Karen at the blood bank bus, people like her who were afraid and had never done it before. And they all felt like heroes. Karen took motivation science seriously. She encouraged choice through her non-controlling language, inviting people to change. She built competence through an organized and thoughtful plan of action that provided the information people needed to understand how the changes would affect their roles in everyday work. And she deepened connection in 3 ways. Karen and her team formulated a strategy based on a solid sense of purpose, meaningful values, and contribution to the greater good for employees and the community they serve. The fun rollout of the change initiative deepened connection as people celebrated, laughed together, and shared a movie and popcorn. But the most profound connection came through her vulnerability when Karen modeled overcoming the fear of change. Promoting optimal motivation didn't end with Alberta Pensions. Once that transformation was complete, Karen moved on to another organization needing change. That's what she does. She wields her executive power to get results. but what makes her and the organizations she serves successful is the way she taps her power through her leadership capacity to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence every step of the way. Mike Easley on Drilling Deep. Mike Easley is a former CEO, consultant, author, executive coach, gigging musician, and soon-to-be therapist. Mike is a recovering engineer with an MBA in business, and a master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Talk about the Wild West. Powder River Energy Corporation. PRE Corp., headquartered in Sundance, Wyoming, is a cooperative that brings energy to rural areas too remote for a public utility company to bother with. That isolation was a catalyst for CEO Mike Easley and his leadership team to institute a strategic execution model that yielded 20% value added to his cooperative's members. Ask Mike how he generated such success in this rugged world of energy, power, and cowboys who happen to be linemen. You learn that the perceived isolation became a catalyst for personal growth and business success. Mike reached a turning point in his career in 2011, when he decided to leave PRE Corp and embark on a job search. When his dream job fell through, he sank into a funk. During this time, he was asked to provide the music for a religious service at a local nursing home, something he'd done in the past. That particular evening, the minister didn't make it. Mike conducted the service, led prayers, and played his guitar. It was a life-changing moment. Mike says he experienced a meaningful connection with each individual in the service and his music. He felt a deep sense of joy from contributing to the welfare of others. That night in the nursing home, Mike recognized how hungry he had been for a sense of connection. He made visiting the nursing home a weekly ritual and began playing regularly at nursing homes and assisted living facilities. He started to challenge his introverted nature and found himself conversing more freely. It dawned on him that he was one Mike, not a group of compartmentalized Mikes, one guy at home, another at work, and another when playing music to senior citizens. He was eager to experience connection, especially to himself. He wanted the joy he felt at the nursing home in other parts of his life. As it turned out, allowing himself to be more vulnerable improved everything: his music, writing, singing, compassion, and empathy for others. Mike was an early adopter of the ideas in this book. His entire leadership team attended beta tests of the original workshop, so he recognized what was happening. He realized that his job searching had been a quest for connection. Being CEO of PRE Corp fulfilled two psychological needs. With his executive power, he had choice. With all his years of experience, he had competence. Mike didn't need a new job, he needed a sense of connection at PRE Corp. Mike returned his energy to the energy organization he had been so ready to leave. He implemented a visioning process. He involved PRE Corp employees in a video discussing Powder River Energy's role in their lives and the community. He worked with the board to change his role, passing most of his operational duties to a new crew so he could focus on building a new culture and developing the PRE Corp leadership team. Mike wanted others to experience connection at work. With their standout results, Mike's team trained other energy co-ops throughout the United States on PRECorp's new strategic execution system. They were dedicated to strengthening the entire industry. Mike continues to reflect on his turnaround. I never want to settle. Yet I want to be at peace and continue to grow. I think leaders need to develop the skills they hope their employees and teammates will have. If you want to be a leader worth following, you need to be able to lead yourself first. I don't want to look over my shoulder at the end of my career and see any carnage left behind. 5. In early 2019, Mike reminded his board that his employment contract would end in late 2020 and asked if they would like to extend the agreement now rather than wait. They declined, kicking that ball down the road. With his future in question, Mike faced an existential crisis, threatening his choice, connection, and competence. He floundered until a trusted friend and mentor suggested he take charge of his life and be in a position by late 2020 to make his own choices about his future. Mike discovered that being a CEO was what he did, not who he was. By the time the contract term expired, Mike had written 2 books, one on leadership and another on how to heal yourself after a dysfunctional relationship. He was also enrolled in a Master of Science in Clinical Mental Health Counseling program. Mike did agree to extend his PRE Corp contract, but only long enough to effect a seamless transition to new leaders, committed to the leadership development process he had implemented. After 20 years as a CEO, Mike is now actively engaged in climbing his second mountain, pursuing a career helping others as a professional, executive and life coach. He holds that creating an optimally motivating workplace and practicing the skill of motivation for himself were critical to his leadership success. Mike shares, by being aware of our internal state, we can create the choice, connection, and competence we need to keep ourselves optimally motivated. Only then will we be the gentler, kinder, and nicer version of ourselves and a leader worth following. Recapping, leader, heal thyself. The leaders in this chapter are exceptional, but I'm thrilled that leaders willing to challenge traditional leadership are becoming less rare. More leaders appreciate the role they play in people's motivation and work passion. They see the value in nurturing a flourishing and effective workplace by applying their leadership capacity to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. But as Deci advised years ago, and as the leaders portrayed in this chapter demonstrate, before you can facilitate anyone else's psychological sense and 7 Are your beliefs eroding people's optimal motivation? Motivation is one of the most vital aspects of leadership and also one of the most confused and misunderstood. This confusion and misunderstanding makes leaders blind to what does and doesn't work. They engage in counterproductive behaviors, believing they are doing the right thing. Leaders are so immersed in 5 motivation-eroding beliefs that they find it difficult to hear, see, or do something different. Research over the past 60 years continues to prove the point. Individuals' rankings of workplace motivators are compared to their managers' rankings of what they think motivates them. The results reflect how most individuals feel. Managers do not know what motivates their people. Managers tend to attribute external motivation to employees' actions not within the employee's control, such as good wages, promotions, and job security. On the other hand, employees prefer more internal motivation, actions within the employee's control, such as interesting work, growth, and learning. Point 1. Why the big disconnect? One reason is that leaders do not have access to someone else's internal state of motivation, only their own. That could explain why managers tend to attribute internal motivations to themselves, while at the same time judging others to be externally motivated. However, when it comes to their employees, leaders depend on their observations of external behaviors and conditions to evaluate people's motivation. Unfortunately, many leaders are not perceptive observers or wise interpreters of what they see, making it nearly impossible to understand someone's internal state of motivation by observing their external behavior. To make understanding people's motivation even more confounding, different people can interpret the same conditions differently. For example, in a team meeting where all the members are asked to share personal information, you can find all 6 motivational outlooks being played out. The leader needs to find ways of shaping the request and the environment so that people are more likely to experience an optimal rather than suboptimal motivational outlook. Research suggests another reason for the disconnect in the ranking of motivators between employees and their managers. Employees don't understand the true nature of their own motivation. For example, an employee who feels she is trapped in her job, being taken advantage of, or overwhelmed by what is being asked of her may ask for more money. Under her breath, she is saying, "They don't pay me enough to put up with this." She doesn't understand that there will never be enough money to compensate for the void created when her psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence are not satisfied. People can't ask for what they don't know they need. When leaders and their employees blame their workplace dissatisfaction on money, it creates 3 erroneous assumptions and detrimental actions. Even though people need and want money, believing it will make them happy distracts them from what genuinely brings them joy. Leaders typically don't have direct control over pay raises and rewards. So it lets them off the motivational hook. They throw their arms up in a leadership mea culpa and declare there's nothing they can do. Leaders may also use their lack of control over salaries and benefits as an excuse to avoid dealing with people's emotionally charged discontent. When people ask for more money or perks to compensate for their discontent, they perpetuate outdated beliefs about the role that money and rewards play in motivation. The primary purpose of this chapter is to explore how your unexplored leadership beliefs could be influencing, and maybe even sabotaging, your approach to motivation. Exploring your leadership beliefs. Leaders are seldom asked to examine their beliefs. In the introduction to this book, I posed unfinished belief statements and asked you to consider how you would fill in the blanks. Here they are again. It's not personal, it's just underscore 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 underscore. The purpose of business is to underscore 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 underscore. Leaders are in a position of underscore 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 underscore. The only thing that really matters is underscore 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 underscore. If you cannot measure it, it underscore 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 underscore. Over the past decade, I have asked thousands of leaders representing dozens of languages to finish the sentences. No matter where the audience is from, they can yell out the completed phrase in unison. These beliefs are particularly sticky, so entrenched in organizational consciousness that we accept them without question. This poses a potential problem. Unexplored beliefs become the foundation for programmed values. Then these programmed values become the basis for rules, processes, procedures, actions, and, more seriously, your leadership behaviors. Your mission, should you accept it, is to challenge these workplace beliefs, examine how they tend to undermine your people's optimal motivation, then consider alternative beliefs and best practices. I encourage you to shine a light on potentially unexamined values in the spirit of developing more meaningful motivational leadership values. Challenge the first eroding belief: it's not personal. It's just business. Employees probably spend more waking hours interacting with their co-workers than family members. Yet managers believe their actions are not personal and just business. Every day you deliver information, feedback, or news to those you lead that affects their work, livelihood, opportunities, status, income, mood, health, or well-being. How is this not personal? Whatever your beliefs, one thing is true: what you say as a leader feels personal to the people you lead. Therein lies the issue: feelings. Earlier in this book, we explored this word in organizations. Do you believe that expressing feelings does not belong in the workplace? If so, challenge yourself by asking, how did this belief become so commonly held? Where did my belief come from? One possibility for why feelings are discouraged in the workplace is that managers don't feel competent to deal with them effectively. True, some employees do not self-regulate well and may let their emotions get the best of them from time to time. But the fear of unruly emotions is disproportionate to the occurrence and severity of emotional outbreaks. What if you changed the belief that it's not personal, just business, to a belief more likely to promote optimal motivation? If it's business, it's personal. Try embracing the idea that all emotions are acceptable, but not all behavior is acceptable. Notice, acknowledge, and deal with a person's emotions. Help others to self-regulate by practicing self-regulation for yourself. Listen to your heart and acknowledge the crucial role feelings play in your work and life. As your beliefs change, watch how your leadership capacity improves. Challenge the second eroding belief: the purpose of business is to make money. When you believe that making money is the purpose of business, you are likely to focus on dashboard metrics instead of the people responsible for providing quality service to your customers and clients. You are apt to overemphasize results and pressure people to get those results. You may be tempted to employ questionable ethical practices. When given a choice, you might choose quantity over quality, short-term results over long-term outcomes, and profits over people. How would your decisions and actions differ if you let go of believing that the purpose of business is to make money? Consider this optimal motivation belief: the purpose of business is to serve. Think how this reframed belief might alter your organization's dashboard metrics, or at least the content and quality of the goals. Consider how your leadership would change if you reframed goals from focusing only on external customer service to including internal service. From focusing on results to improving the quality of effort to achieve those results, or from focusing on outcomes to emphasizing the growth and learning to produce the outcomes. Hard-nosed business people will push back on these ideas with a traditional argument: you can serve all you want, but this soft stuff doesn't make you money, and if you don't make a profit, you will go out of business. Then you won't be serving anyone. Yes, a business must make a profit to sustain itself. But to conclude that profit is the purpose of business is an illogical leap. You need air to live, plus water and food. But your life's purpose is not to just breathe, drink, and eat. Your purpose is richer and more profound than basic survival. The nobler your purpose and more meaningful your values, the more they influence how you live and lead. The nature of human motivation is not about making money. The nature of human motivation is in making meaning. Making a profit or serving the people who serve your customers should never be an either-or decision. It is always both. But service comes before profit. To paraphrase what I have often heard Ken Blanchard proclaim, profit is the applause you get from creating an optimally motivating environment for your people so they want to take care of your customers. 2. Definitive evidence shows that organizational vitality, measured by return on investment, earnings by share, access to venture capital, stock price, debt load, and other financial indicators, depends on employee work, passion and customer devotion. It does not work the other way around. Organizational vitality is not what determines customer devotion or employee work passion. Point 3. Your organization prospers when you focus on fulfilling employees' psychological needs so they can serve customers' needs. An old sports analogy works equally well in business. Focusing on profit is like playing the game with your eye on the scoreboard instead of the ball. Challenge the belief that the purpose of business is to make money, and consider an optimal motivation belief: the purpose of business is to serve both your people and your customers. Profit is a byproduct of doing both of these well. Watch how your people respond to your changed belief. When you believe that the purpose of business is to serve, you lead differently. Your decisions and actions are more likely to cultivate a workplace that supports people's optimal motivation. Then notice the results and accept the well-earned applause in the form of organizational vitality. Keep that in mind as you avoid practices that undermine people's psychological needs and encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence instead. Challenge the third eroding belief: leaders are in a position of power. Imagine you work for a large organization. You catch the elevator to another floor and notice someone is already in it, the company's CEO. You have never met him, but you recognize him from company-wide meetings. Your heart might race a bit. You might think twice before you speak. You might feel excited at the opportunity to make his acquaintance, or you might feel worried about making a bad impression. Suffice it to say, if he was someone of lesser stature or if you hadn't recognized him as the CEO, the dynamic would be different. Managers need to be incredibly mindful and clear about the types of power they have and use. Most leaders will be surprised by the potentially negative emotional impact of having and using their power, in almost all its forms. These are the words of Dr. Dre Zygarmy, who found himself surprised by the strength of his research on how a leader's power affects people's motivational outlooks. Point 4. Even when you don't have intentions to use your power, just having it creates a dynamic that requires your awareness and sensitivity. How your power affects people's motivation. Zygarmy, along with Dr. Taylor Payton and myself, studied the use of power by leaders in the workplace. Point 5. You might find it helpful to consider the most commonly used types of power described below and the potential effect each one has on your people's emotional well-being, intentions, and motivational outlooks. What you discover might surprise you. Reward power is your power to promise monetary or non-monetary compensation. There are two types of reward power. Impersonal reward power is the power to grant special benefits, promotions, or favorable considerations. Personal reward power is when your employees' feelings depend on being accepted, valued, and liked by you. Employees report that when they perceive any of the above three forms of reward power at work, they experience a suboptimal motivational outlook. Coercive power is your power to use threats and punishment if people fail to conform to desired outcomes. Understandably, coercive power usually results in a negative relationship between leader and follower, and a suboptimal motivational outlook. Leaders often see coercive power as the easiest, most expedient, and most justifiable form of power. Truly the junk food of power, coercive power creates a workplace where people must exercise high-quality self-regulation to avoid a suboptimal motivational outlook. Referent power is based on how your employees identify with you. Ironically, you may enjoy certain work relationships because your employees' self-identity is enhanced through interaction with you. Their actions are based on their desire to be similar to and associated with you, or they think so highly of you that they are afraid to disagree with you. It might surprise you that when employees report that their managers have referent power, they often also report experiencing a suboptimal motivational outlook. Their dependence on you for their internal state of well-being tends to undermine their choice, connection, and competence. Legitimate power is bestowed through a position or title that gives a leader the justifiable right to request compliance from another individual. Having legitimate power is a blessing and a curse. You can do more good with it, but, as Spider-Man will tell you, with great power comes great responsibility. You must be sensitive to how others perceive and integrate your legitimate power, lest, despite your good intentions, people interpret your power as diminishing their experience of choice, connection, and competence. Often referred to as position power, legitimate power manifests in various forms. Reciprocity stems from your employees feeling obligated to comply with your requests because you have done something positive for them. Equity power, thought of as quid pro quo, is when employees sense that you expect compensation for the work or effort you have put into the relationship. Dependence power is when your employees feel obliged to assist you because you are in need, not from a sense of connection but an imposed sense of social responsibility. Expert power comes through your depth and breadth of knowledge. Expert power relies on the perceptions your employees hold regarding your superior knowledge. Information power relies on your employees' perception of how you present persuasive material or logic. Even the last two types of power can result in employees reporting a suboptimal motivational outlook when they feel manipulated, threatened, or overwhelmed by your expertise or use of information, knowledge, or power. The bottom line is that using power tends to undermine people's psychological needs. It's not just your use of the power but also people's perception that you have it and could use it. Your power demands that people exert more energy to self-regulate and experience choice, connection, and competence. As Zygarmi puts it, power is very precious stuff. It entices the leader into flights of self-delusion and separateness from those they lead. 6. If you are the CEO riding the elevator, you are not wielding power, but your title and assumed power changes the dynamic between you and the people you lead. What can a leader do then? When Ken Blanchard was elected class president in the 7th grade, his father congratulated him. Then, he told him, "Now that you have power, don't ever use it." Great leaders are great because people trust and respect them, not because they have power. Theodore Blanchard was an admiral in the Navy who told Ken that anyone who thinks that military-style leadership is my way or the highway leadership has never gone to battle. According to Admiral Blanchard, if leaders acted like that, your men would shoot you before the enemy could. 7. Using your power to motivate people won't work if you want them to. Experience optimal motivation. Shifting to an optimal outlook is something people can do only for themselves. But the workplace you create has an enormous influence on how successfully people will self-regulate, satisfy their psychological needs, and experience optimal motivation. We need to change the belief that leaders are in a position of power. Consider this optimal motivation belief: leaders are in a position to empower others. You have the opportunity to empower people by encouraging choice, deepening connection, and building competence. Consider this optimal motivation belief: leaders are in a position to empower others. When you avoid undermining practices and put your leadership capacity into practice, you focus your power on cultivating a workplace where your people, your organization, and you are reaping the rewards of optimal motivation. Challenge the fourth eroding belief: the only thing that really matters is results. At a recent speaking engagement, I asked, "How would you finish this statement? The only thing that really matters in business is blank." The answer was so obvious that over 300 people spontaneously filled in the blank by yelling in unison, "Results." I then asked them to consider the effect this tyranny of results has on the workplace. It was not easy. Leaders tend to tune out if you mess with results. Executives cannot imagine what matters at the end of the day, besides results measured by dashboard metrics. I'm asking you what I asked of them: to consider alternatives to the traditional focus on results. Redefine and reframe results. People want to achieve organizational metrics and assigned goals, when they are fair and agreed upon, but often interpret them as external or imposed. You can help people shift to an aligned motivational outlook by clarifying the underlying values behind your dashboard metrics. People may even shift to an integrated motivational outlook when metrics are authentically positioned as a means to fulfilling a noble purpose. When Express Employment Professionals announced sales goals at a recent conference of franchise owners, the leaders reminded the attendees that the purpose of their business was to put 1 million people to work. The energy generated was electric. When Barrett Kohler, my publisher, puts out its catalog of offerings to buyers, the cover's primary message is a community dedicated to creating a world that works for all. My experience has been that every goal, metric, and decision pursued at Barrett Kohler has that purpose at heart. Framing results differently and trusting that individuals will still achieve necessary metrics will help people shift their motivational outlook. Do not imply that ends justify the means. If you believe results are what really matter without considering why those results are meaningful and how people go about achieving them, you are, in essence, saying the ends justify the means. What a sorry picture this paints. We do not need the science of motivation to prove that means matter. In the news, we witness scandals and horror stories of people, organizations, industries, and countries who prize ends over means every day. A graphic illustration is captured in the Academy Award-nominated 2005 documentary Enron, The Smartest Guys in the Room. You could read the book upon which it is based, but you wouldn't hear the unnerving taped conversations between giddy energy brokers celebrating as fires ravage California and people are losing everything they own in their lives. The brokers knew the fires would spark higher energy demands and prices, ensuring the results for which they were being held accountable. Enron is considered one of the ugliest business scandals in American history, but it offers a more disturbing example of what happens when people prize results more than the means to achieve them. You ache for those who suffered at the hands of the energy brokers, but also for the brokers themselves, who were addicted to motivational junk food so unhealthy it poisoned their morals. The brokers were responsible for their actions, which is why I advocate for individuals to master their motivation. However, the leaders were also responsible for creating a culture based on beliefs that eroded choice, thwarted connection, undermined competence, and led to inhumane behavior. A focus on results may yield short-term gains. However, those gains are at risk and compromised when people feel pressure, disconnected from meaningful goals, and used without an appreciation for their competence. The evidence is clear: people can achieve the results you seek, even if their Psychological needs are thwarted. But their negative energy and lack of well-being make it rare for them to sustain or repeat those results, let alone exceed them. Reframe the belief that the only thing that matters is results. Consider this optimal motivation belief. In the end, what really matters is not just the results people achieve but why and how they achieve them. Consider this optimal motivation belief. In the end, what really matters is not just the results people achieve but why and how they achieve them. Observe the shift in people's energy and your own when you focus on what really matters in the workplace. Focus on meaningful results that fulfill people's psychological needs for optimal motivation. Then trust that the numbers will add up. Challenge the fifth eroding belief: if you cannot measure it, it doesn't matter. Setting measurable goals and outcomes is essential. Having a defined finish line in front of you can be positively compelling. In Chapter 5, I wrote about ensuring higher results through SMART goals, where the M is changed to motivating. However, we also need to move beyond SMART goal setting and embrace aspects of work that are not easily measured. The nature of things that cannot be measured. Some parents have SMART goals for their child's education and development of skills. But how would you answer this question? What do you most hope for your child? Most parents tell me they hope their children experience meaningful relationships, enjoy a profound connection to the world, contribute to society, give and receive love, fulfill a noble purpose, are passionate about their work, discover what makes them happy, feel safe and secure, perceive they have choices, and can navigate and master the world around them. The dreams parents most hope for their children cannot be easily measured. The same phenomenon happens when I ask leaders what they most wish for their people at work. They may use different terms, but they want a positive sense of well-being for their people. At the heart of what leaders hope for their people is fulfilling their psychological needs for choice, connection, and competence. Despite the deep knowledge of what they want for people, leaders still focus on what they can easily measure. As in life, the most rewarding aspects of work are those most difficult to measure. If you believe the statement, if you cannot measure it, it does not matter, ask yourself why. Is dealing with the emotional nature of things not easily measured outside your comfort zone? Do you believe your job is to control circumstances, and it's too overwhelming to manage something that's not easily measured? Some things are best left unmeasured. One of life's great joys is eating in Italy. Ask anyone who has traveled there. Food tastes better in Italy. I had the profound experience of attending a week-long cooking course in Tuscany. I say profound because it changed the quality of my life, not just my cooking but also my perspective on day-to-day living. The chef refused to provide exact measurements for anything he made. How can I tell you how much water to put in the pasta dough? It depends on the quality of your flour and the kind of day, the temperature, the humidity. You must add some water and oil until it feels right. He was hesitant to commit to a menu or plan for the week. If the zucchini flowers were blossoming, we would have fried squash blossoms. If not, ripe tomatoes would become the centerpiece of a caprese salad. The chef was teaching us mindfulness, to be present in the moment. Notice the world around us, and be aware of our many options and choices. The food becomes a possibility for something more meaningful than nutrition. And people can taste the difference. Of course, we must measure many aspects in life and at work. Pastries are a science, where measuring makes the difference between a fluffy cupcake and a hockey puck. But a growth step for leaders is to become more mindful of promoting dreams, ideals, and experiences that cannot be easily measured. That includes becoming more comfortable with feelings. If leaders rule out people's emotional nature at work, including their own, because they are not mindful or skilled enough to cope, we all lose what it means to be fully human. That is too high a price to pay for being comfortable. Reframe the belief that if you cannot measure it, it is not important. Put this optimal motivation belief into practice. If you cannot measure it, it's probably really, really important. Put this optimal motivation belief into practice. If you cannot measure it, it's probably really, really important. Observe the shift in energy when you apply your leadership capacity to Focus on what cannot be easily measured, such as love, joy, and gratitude. Your people will eat it up. Recapping: are your beliefs eroding people's optimal motivation? You cannot master the leadership capacity to fulfill people's psychological needs and improve their psychological sense with beliefs that erode choice, thwart connection, and undermine competence. Embrace beliefs that promote optimal motivation. If it's business, it's personal. The purpose of business is to serve. Leaders are in a position to empower others. In the end, what really matters is not just the results people achieve, but why and how they achieve them. If you cannot measure it, it's probably really important. Remember, not all beliefs are values, but all values are beliefs. Your values shape your leadership point of view, inform your decisions, guide your actions, and ultimately influence whether the people you lead experience suboptimal or optimal motivation. Remember, not all beliefs are values, but all values are beliefs. Your values shape your leadership point of view, inform your decisions, guide your actions, and ultimately determine whether the people 8. The promise of optimal motivation. Being a leader is a privileged position. What you say, how you say it, and why you say it has meaning to your organization, the people you lead, and your personal experience. The promise of optimal motivation for your organization. Most leaders are stuck with systems that promote driving over thriving. Organizational systems are built on the faulty assumption that people need to be reinforced, rewarded, or driven to accomplish goals. They underestimate people's basic need to grow, excel, and contribute. Even with the new science of motivation, many organizations will continue to perpetuate the pecking pigeon paradigm, banking on motivating people through external means that appear expedient, easy, and controllable. The question is, at what cost? Escalating salaries, bonuses, and rewards are obvious costs. But when an organization focuses on rewarding the top 10%, what does it do to the motivation of the other 90%? What about the hidden costs of detrimental mental and physical health, absenteeism, and increased insurance rates, to name a few, wrought by traditional motivations focus on motivational junk food? What about the opportunity losses in dedication, loyalty, creativity, and innovation? 1. The time has come to consider the potential opportunity gains in teaching leaders and individuals the skill of motivation. What might happen if organizations expanded their traditional focus on results, performance, and productivity to focus on helping people fulfill their needs for choice, connection, and competence? What if leaders learned to avoid undermining practices and adopt the leadership capacity to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence? What if values were developed based on optimal motivation beliefs rather than outdated traditional beliefs? The time has come to consider the potential opportunity gains in teaching leaders and individuals the skill of motivation. Answers to these questions could lead to a workplace where autonomous people hold themselves accountable, where meaningful relationships translate into organizational citizenship behaviors, and where competence leads to a learning organization rich with innovation, quality products and services, and streamlined processes. When the ideas in this book move from theory into practice, a workplace full of passionate people with a positive sense of well-being is an opportunity and a promise. The promise of optimal motivation for the people you lead. I ask executive audiences this question: what do you want from your people? I get immediate and reasonable responses, such as I want their focus, attention, effort, dedication, and loyalty, or I want them to meet expectations, make their numbers, achieve their goals, do what I ask, and get results. Then I ask a follow-up question: what do you want for your people? It's funny how removing one letter from the question generates blank and dumbfounded stares. You see skepticism or even cynicism as they sense you are about to discuss some touchy-feely topic. With some prodding, the executives come up with what they want for their people: happiness, safety, security, health, fun, a sense of accomplishment, resilience, and peace. I find these answers fascinating. The responses are similar to the characteristics of positive well-being. Yet leaders tend to focus on what they want from people, which undercuts well-being. They have it backward. When you focus on what you want for people, you are more likely to get the results you want from people. When you focus on what you want for people, you are more likely to get the results you want from people. The following personal experience reinforces the difference you can make when you encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. Alexa was about to play either the final game of her high school volleyball season or go on to the state championship. They were playing their crosstown rival for the privilege of representing their division in the playoffs. Anyone involved in high school sports knows it can get tense and exciting, and parents can be more animated than the student athletes. Alexa's dad, Dre, and I were shouting and jumping up with every point. In the best-of-3 series, the two teams were tied going into the third game. It was do or die. This was side-out volleyball, meaning that the only way a team could score was during a serve. The server would continue serving until she lost the point. Alexa's team was down, and it didn't look good. Then Alexa stepped up to serve. It felt as if I was holding my breath during her entire service. She won the first point. Then the second. Alexa's team moved ahead, and they went on to win the game. Dre and I were beside ourselves. I rushed down the bleachers to celebrate. I flew. Somehow, my husband beat me to Alexa, and he was doing his Italian dad thing, kissing her on her forehead and hugging her. I was impatiently awaiting my turn. Finally, Dre stepped back. I thought this was my chance. But with his hands on Alexa's shoulders, he looked her directly in the eyes and asked, "Alexa, when you got up to serve, your team was losing 9-12. By the time you finished your serve, your team was ahead 13-12 and went on to win the game. How did you feel about your serve tonight?" I rolled my eyes and thought, "Stop talking, let me in there to celebrate." Then I noticed something I had never witnessed before. Alexa's eyes began to glow. She said, "Dad, you know how I got frustrated with my serve and wanted to quit volleyball? But tonight, when I hit that overhead slam, I saw movement on the ball, and I knew there was no way they could return it. I got into the flow, and it was amazing. I am so happy for my team." At that moment, I realized the power of activating optimal motivation with others. In his wisdom, Dre first practiced the skill of motivation for himself. Through his high-quality self-regulation, he made the moment about Alexa and her experience, not his experience. What if I had gotten to Alexa first? I enjoy being excited and celebrating. Our conversation would have been about me, my excitement, pleasure, and interpretation of what just happened. I needed to reflect and ask myself, why are you excited? Whose experience are you celebrating? Had I gotten to Alexa before Dre, I could have undermined her psychological needs to satisfy my own. Dre self-regulated and acted on his love for his daughter. At that moment, he gave her a priceless gift. Asking Alexa how she felt gave her the gift of choice. She had the opportunity to reflect on her interpretation of what happened and choose how she would remember it. Dre gave her the gift of connection. He cared more about Alexa than his own need to express his excitement. He also allowed her to relate her outstanding performance to the team experience. She realized her joy wasn't about winning but her contribution to the team's success. Dre also gave Alexa the gift of competence for the first time in her teen years. I believe Alexa made the connection between hard work and results, effort, and outcome. She felt masterful at that moment. She will be able to recall and relish that sense of competence for the rest of her life. Her father created a pocket of tranquility in an atmosphere where it would be easy to think the experience was only about winning. Alexa reflected and rejoiced in a deeper, more profound way. Don't get me wrong. She felt jubilation, but the reasons for feeling it shifted. An interaction between a father and daughter reinforced the power of optimal motivation. But the lesson learned is relevant for any workplace. The essence of the promise of optimal motivation. A great irony of leadership is that motivating your people doesn't work, because they are already motivated. People are always motivated. What works is embracing your leadership capacity to encourage choice, deepen connection, and build competence. By letting go of traditional motivation schemes, Your leadership helps people develop and improve their psychological sense so they are more likely to experience optimal motivation. Your opportunity lies in facilitating people's shift to an optimal motivational outlook so they thrive and excel. You also have a chance to master your own motivation. As an optimally motivated leader, you are more than a role model. Your vitality creates a positive ripple effect that fuels the optimal motivation that leads to employee work passion. To appreciate the essence of optimal motivation, imagine people who choose to come to work because they experience a sense of positive well-being, feel that they are contributing to something greater than themselves, and are continually learning and growing. People can flourish as they succeed. This is the promise of optimal motivation.